So for the past month or so, France's neoliberal establishment has been dealing with a few protests. Now, the Yellow Vest protests, the demonstrations have begun in the face, of course, President Emmanuel Macron's neoliberal policies. Now, these people, these protesters with yellow vests, are basically representing poor and working people and have been calling on the government to stop supporting the wealthy elites and move away from neoliberal economic policy. Now, there's a lot of outlets that have reported on this, and they've been talking about how, oh, this is a Trumpian response to environmental policy like carbon taxes. No, that is not what's going on. Now, does the tax have something to do with this? Yes, I'm going to explain that. Now, first, I'm going to go to President Trump's response to this to show how everybody's getting it wrong. And we'll start out with the most wrong person in the world, President Trump. Now, he said, "I'm glad that my friend Emmanuel Macron and the protesters in Paris have agreed with the conclusion I reached 2 years ago." And what conclusion is that, Sir Orangington? He said, "The Paris Agreement is fatally flawed because it raises the price of energy for responsible countries while whitewashing some of the worst polluters." So, oh, no, you know what? This is about the Paris Climate Agreement. I was right. The Paris Climate Agreement is stupid. Let's let the world burn. You realize we have 12 years left before climate change becomes basically irreversible. No matter what we do, we will not reach the 2 degree Celsius warming limit that is sustainable for basically human life. Like, we're kind of teetering on the edge here. And here's Trump saying, "No, yep, Macron, he was right because I was right, and the Paris Climate Agreement sucks." That's not what's going on. Here's the thing, right? Now, the French citizenry is against a tax, right? Now, they're against, it's not necessarily a carbon tax, it's actually a fuel tax that has raised the prices of diesel and gasoline. Now, that tax is actually the final straw in a slew of business-friendly and anti-worker legislation. That tax is a regressive tax. And by the way, it just adds to the already 20% value-added tax that people in France already pay. Those taxes are regressive, meaning they hit the poor and the middle class much, much harder than they do on people who are wealthy. So now again, median monthly pay in France right now is about 1,700 euros. So that's not very much. And it can cost about 80 euros to fill up your car. So gas is really expensive in France. So that is a significant chunk out of your paycheck to just fuel up your car. So now that hurts, right? So now the people, of course, complain. They're like, "Hey, Macron, it costs too much for us to get to work, especially when we're living in the rural areas of France. Can you do something about it?" Okay, well, here's what Macron basically said. "Oh, you got a problem with fuel being expensive? Okay, well, carpool." Well, not everybody has the ability to carpool. Not everybody, especially if you're living in rural areas, has the ability to carpool. So that's not a good, valid solution, especially when the real problem seems to be that people in France aren't making enough money to get by. And they're being, of course, taxed with these regressive taxes. Now, look, a lot of people look at progressives and they're like, "Well, what's the problem? You love taxes." No, we don't love taxes. What we do is that we understand that taxes help fund things that people want. And look, let's be honest, France has a generous social safety net. So there is a level of taxation there that is acceptable because you get a return for it. For example, if you pay higher taxes, but that goes to your medical care and that goes to education, well, then that's good because in a way it comes back to you and it makes society stronger. But when it's a regressive tax that gets no benefit back to you, it's just, "Oh, this tax has no benefit to me because, or to society, because it's just making things more expensive." Now, look, you could argue, but yeah, but they're trying to change attitudes to get people to drive less and to do that. I understand the idea behind that, but at the same time, I think it's not a good strategy, because what you're doing is that you're punishing people for, on the lower end of the economic spectrum for doing things that they normally have to do anyway. People have to commute to work. People have to drive their cars. They have to get, they get together for family get-togethers and things like that. And you're going to need fuel costs, right? You're going to, and if you're paying higher for fuel costs, that actually has a negative impact on you. And also has a negative impact, I think, on the economy. What we need to do is to make sure the poor and middle class actually have more money. And that gives me to another of Macron's changes. He gave a 3.2 billion euro tax cut for the rich. That is $3.6 billion in US money. So increase taxes on poor and working people, decrease taxes on the rich. That's what Macron's been doing. Classic neoliberal, pro-corporate friendly policy. So now he also went after labor rights, as well as things like pensions. So yeah, that's going to cause a lot of people to be incredibly pissed. Okay. So Macron is deeply out of touch with working people in France. So now here in America, it's interesting to have this discussion because, again, I can view this from a lens through the US lens, right? So here in America, we give tax cuts out like candy to corporations. Trillions of dollars. This is $3.6 billion in tax cuts to the rich. And the whole country is basically on fire. Whereas in America, we're like, well, of course we give all our money to corporations. That's how we've always done things. What are you guys talking about? Because if you give tax cuts to corporations, it'll trickle down and we'll have jobs. Most of our country, unfortunately, not most of it, I should say, polls don't reflect that. But the political establishment that is in power in Washington has overwhelmingly agreed, oh yeah, we got to cut corporate taxes so they can create jobs and they can invest in communities. When has that ever happened? It's never happened, and it's the biggest lie in neoliberal economics. Oh, if we just are more friendly to corporations, they will bow down and bestow us. They will come down and bestow us with jobs, like Jesus coming down, or whatever that painting is, where God comes down and touches Michelangelo's finger instead of Michelangelo's jobs. I don't know. It's about as insane. So now here in America, just to give you a juxtaposition here, French people, as you can see right now, when you give tax cuts to the rich and raise working people's taxes without any sort of benefit to society or personal payoff, or any sort of policy that goes to help more jobs, etc. French people, they're like, oh yeah, you know what? We're not going to roll over. We're going to fucking riot. They build guillotines. Now, people in America, we get all aghast and pissed off when somebody talks mean to somebody in a restaurant. Look, you remember the complete media freakout when people yelled at Mitch McConnell and threw away his dinner. Oh my God, how dare you? Stability. We need stability in politics. France says, yeah, you know what we're going to do? For example, we will set your car on fire, dance in the flames for a raise. And you know what? The interesting part about that is that what France is doing is actually working. Earlier today, there were reports where Macron is now promising to speed up tax relief for struggling workers and to get rid of a tax hike for retirees. So that tax hike on pensions, gone. He is also pledging to raise the minimum wage and to abolish taxes on overtime pay starting January 1st. All of those measures are measures that have been demanded by the Yellow Vest protesters. They said, this is what we want, and we will literally overturn this fucking country. Your apple cart, flip it over, set it on fire, and throw it at you. And it worked. It turns out protest actually works. Now, the reason that this probably doesn't get a lot of play in America, that we don't talk about it like this, is that the media and politicians really don't want us to see that this actually is something that works. They're scared. They're scared because they know neoliberalism is failing all over the world, especially here in America. And that if people got out and protested in large enough numbers and they realized who the real enemy is, and that is business-friendly neoliberal corporatism, and got out in the street to protest that, we would be an unstoppable force. And they are afraid of that. So they want us to keep fighting each other instead of looking to who's really picking our pockets. And that is the rich, and that's the elite. France shows us kind of how it's done. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.